Alright. Sit down and watch a good old medieval fantasy show. Wait. What's he wearing? Oh, that's not right. What's this supposed to be? Look at that nonsense. Studded leather? Korea, have you betrayed me as well? So, fantasy entertainment has a love affair with leather armor. And of course we do. I mean, look at it. It's cool looking. It makes sense that these people that have just started out with this whole agricultural thing, who are using swords to fight and think magic is real, would use the substance that is so plentiful to them as armor. Look at bikers. They wear lots of leather, from jackets, pants, chaps, gloves. They wear it all over. Why do you think that is? Is it because it looks cool? Because they want to seem super badass? Yes, absolutely. But they also want protection. See, leather does provide better protection than your clothing does. It has a better ability to protect the rider from abrasions and damage from road cutting you up as you slide along it after an accident. Gambeson might actually do this as well. Why are there not more motorcycle gangs wearing gambeson? That would be awesome. So leather provides some protection, but did people actually use it as armor? The answer gets a little funny, because people who know a little bit say, no, it's not a thing. If you know a little bit more, like let's say you're a YouTube historian, you will hem and haw and say something about how it kind of was a thing, but it's not really a thing. A very lawyerly response, something that I'm used to. And sometimes you don't cite a single source in your description. But then when someone calls you out on being a little incorrect, you fall back on, that's not what I meant, and defend yourself by saying that someone interpreted you incorrectly. I mean, the basis of our language is being able to communicate with each other and trying to you don't read off a definition from a dictionary in a video essay. It's so cliche.
No, I will not calm down about this. There is a reason why we start contracts with definitions and why every attorney has a copy of Black's Law Dictionary. Why did I switch to e-readers? It makes this visual gag so much harder to sell. No one can tell that this is a dictionary. So why is the discussion of leather armor so controversial? And what about outside of Europe? Was leather armor actually a thing? To understand the separation between fact and fantasy and how we ended up here, I think you need to review and understand how armor works on stage, and through that, early film. In the medium of a stage, you only need to look at a play set in the medieval time period. Look no further than any local production of Henry V. Unless you're looking at a high-end production, most of the costuming is shiny polyester fabric. Even in the high-end productions, like the ones produced by the Royal Shakespeare Company, you're looking at plastic or EVA foam painted to look like metal. Only in the highest-end productions can you see metal ever used. And when it is, you can even hear the little clinks of the armor as the actor walks across stage. Now, this transferred over to film as well. Reviewing the earliest showcasing of armor on film, you can see literal cloth being used by actors in The Passion of Joan of Arc, and more of the same with shiny bits in the costuming of The Adventures of Robin Hood. Errol Flynn is fighting in literal tights and cloth that wouldn't stop a butter knife. Now, that's not to say that they never use it. The Globe Theatre, famous for being Shakespeare's own theatre, has used metal armor in its production. And let's not forget about the man himself, probably the most acclaimed and famous Shakespearean actor of all time, Laurence Olivier, and his movie production of Henry V, which, for my money, beats out most historical movies in its accuracy for using armor on film. Just magnificent. To start, medieval film should be defined to deliberately include those movies that attempt to present a plausible, but not necessarily historical vision of life in the distant past. Movies regarding Arthurian legend, films concerning themselves with Robin Hood, works that readily invent their own history. These visions rely on the actual Middle Ages just as strongly as do the so-called historical ones. Creations such as Braveheart and the vast legion of Joan of Arc films. It is also important to draw a line between early films, those leading up to the midpoint of the last century, and those dating in the last 30 years or so. Audience expectations have changed radically, to the point where holding Errol Flynn's Robin Hood to the same standards as Kevin Costner's does not make much sense. As well, in the early days of film, access to medieval scholarship was limited, as was the scholarship itself. Today, costume designers are Googling their information, whereas 60 years ago, one would have to travel to a museum or research library, and in many cases, far removed from the centers of film production. Even today, there's only one dedicated museum to arms and armor in the United States. And we're looking at a fantasy game here, and looking at pure historical accuracy is a tricky thing. I'm not ignorant to the fact that anytime someone comments on historical accuracy in this game, it comes out like, yeah, wizards throw fireballs and dragons fly through the sky, but I draw the line at women owning property. And to be clear, there are a lot of claims of historical accuracy that are just dog whistles for people wanting to put their own prejudice into the game. I personally despise that, both on trying to exclude people from being able to see themselves in the game and because, most of the time, it's historically inaccurate. Mongol women owned property. I'm telling you folks, it was, for the time, one of the most progressive societies on Earth. We're gonna get back to them. However, I like looking into the history of this stuff, and you clicked on this video, so I'm guessing you do too. So, let's get back to the question. Was leather armor a thing in history? The short answer is yes. Leather has been one of the basic tools of our species. But what is leather? Well, leather is made by tanning animal hide or skin. Tanning is a process of treating the skin so they don't decay. While it does delay the decaying process, it doesn't stop it. This causes one of the main problems when studying historical leather armor. It just doesn't last that long, at least not in the historical sense. So while there is mention of it in certain texts of the ancient world, few actual examples survive. That being said, you will find numerous YouTube videos talking about leather armor and downplaying it. Now, this is where the lawyerly talk comes in. They hedge their bets. You'll hear phrases like, it was not prevalent in the medieval period, or some such statements. The wording to me seems a bit loaded. See, when we say things like the medieval period or the Middle Ages, a lot of folks don't just mean something specific to time, but also region. Because the reality of the world and the reality of Europe are two different things. Let's discuss. This is Europe. And this is the rest of the world. You may notice a size discrepancy here. Europe is the second smallest continent on the planet, but they are very full of themselves when it comes to history. And if we take the time frame outlined by the Middle Ages and expand it to the world, the statements made by Eurocentric history buffs become less and less credible. Let's look around the world. Where do we start? Well, my beloved Korea. During the Joseon period, there were 4 types of armor worn: metal, leather, paper, and fabric. Many of the poor soldiers could not afford metal armor, so they resorted to what's called bigap, or leather armor. It was some of the most common armor in the army at the time, as it was cheaper in some areas to get animal hide than it was to get metal. What is interesting here is that when you say something like leather armor, I think most people think of cowhide, but for the Koreans and many in the East, Southeast, and South Asia, rhino hide was used for armor. As you can imagine, different leathers have different durabilities. This information was extremely hard to get. I actually had to meticulously translate history papers from Korean to English to find this out. As I don't really know Korean that well, it was really difficult. But if you're a European historian who doesn't have time or the inclination to do that kind of work, you'd probably miss out on that. What's interesting is that the armor is actually cotton on the outside. You might notice the little studs on it. Well, those studs hung onto rectangular pieces on the inside. I mean, you could possibly call it, I don't know, studded leather armor. Speaking of which, don't you just love Korean armor? I mean, I love those studs. Now, this isn't studded leather armor, this is Korean brigandine armor. These studs held onto metal plates that were held under the leather or fabric. It is said that Gygax or some D&D writer saw this and thought of studded leather, not realizing what brigandine was. They were not historians, they were gamers. There is evidence of leather armor in China as well. However, it scrapes just under the medieval time period cutoff starting point, which is generally assumed to be the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century, so we're not really counting it here. Over in Japan, however, we do make it in with the common use of lamellar leather armor and hardened leather armor for their troops. In fact, in 780 CE, Emperor Conan's government ordered troops to start using leather armor because the previous types of armor took too much effort to upkeep. They would eventually move to metal armor for most of their troops later on. Now, moving across the world to the Americas, the evidence indicates that North American indigenous warriors use leather armor in combat. Much of these records are hard to come by due to the nature of record keeping and the fact that the leather is, by nature, biodegradable. But there was always something tickling my brain when people talk about leather armor, not because of the thing of prevalence, because the European medieval world had a close-up encounter with leather armor. Of course I'm speaking of the Grand Mongol Empire. How did you all miss this one? Were you too busy getting raffle stomped by the horse-riding arrow delivery systems to notice that most of them were wearing leather? Because the Europeans at the time certainly noticed, and they told us about it. Marco Polo said as much. The Mongol weapons were bows and swords and clubs, but they rely mainly on their bows, for they're excellent archers. On their backs they wear armor of buffalo hide or some other leather, which is very tough. Wealthy Mongolians could equip themselves more fully. Swords and other metal gear could be imported, armor for horses and man could be made at home out of leather bands. The steppe people didn't stay stationary long enough to have much in the way of metal forges. Most of their metal goods were pillaged from conquered territories. What they had in abundance were animals. To give you an idea, Mongol warriors each had 3 to 4 horses for them as they campaigned. The sheep were the most numerous animals on the steppe. It was very easy for them to get leather, and very difficult for them to get metal. Also, metal armor wasn't really conducive to the steppe way of fighting. Mongolian horses are rather small, only about 600 pounds. The normal carrying capacity for these are about 105 pounds. Assuming the average rider was 150 pounds, it's already over capacity. Light, scaled leather armor was the order of the day. The Mongols had the largest land empire the world has ever known. During the Middle Ages, it stretched from Korea to Germany. Most of their troops wore leather armor, but it still wasn't a thing, really, in the Middle Ages. So why do we think this way? Why are so many historical folks in TTRPG forums always talking about how leather is unrealistic? Maybe it wasn't the same style that we see on TV, but to me, it seems to be a little bit of a simpler reason. They don't mean the world. They mean Europe. I get that Europe is the place where a lot of our traditions come from with regards to fantasy, but the world is a huge place, and there's much more out there. And look, I'm not here to make the case that mail armor is not better than leather. It is, in almost every way. I'm not even saying leather should surpass gambeson. I'm a huge fan of gambeson armor, and I feel that it is underpowered and underutilized in fantasy. It looks awesome, folks. And I'm not here to insult European fantasy. I love it. It's how I got into the hobby. I know a lot of people say, oh, I'm sick of European fantasy. I'm not. I'm still there for it. But I mean, leather armor, it also just looks cool, and the rule of cool should win out most of the time. So, full disclosure, I actually own a pair of leather pants that I wore to the Renaissance Festival one time. They were hot. Also, they were hot, and the Texas Renaissance Festival can get really humid and muggy. So enjoy your leather armor, you kinky and thanks for watching. Oh, one more thing. Studded leather armor wasn't a thing. So in a desperate search for studded leather, just to make a joke about how it was a real thing, I found this sweet picture of leather armor covered in Chinese coins made by the indigenous Tlingit people of Alaska. Thought it was super cool. Just wanted to show you. Now we're done. Thanks for watching.